and welcome all of my sprites, both big and little. I am so excited to be with you today and work on developing our understanding of depth and thinking about using shadow to create depth. So let's jump right into it.
So the first thing that we need to do to create depth in our shape is to understand the concept of a core shadow and a terminator line. So I'm going to draw a circle here. There's my circle. And what I want to do is I want to be able to split my object into two colours. And that's sort of what this process of creating depth is going to be about. It's going to be about simplifying a shape into only two colours, kind of similar to what we have in the famous Che Guevara picture. So that's what we're going to be aiming for today. So instead of seeing it as a sort of a large range of different tones, which is in reality what we have, we've got sort of a highlighted point here, we've got some quite light tones here, which go away when I put my hand on them. Then around the middle here we have some mid-tones, then we've got some reflected light going on here, and then we've got some really dark tones here at the bottom. But we're going to ignore all of that to start with, and we're just going to start by trying to see it as two colours. So I'm going to draw the line, and this is called the terminator line. So I want you to remember that term, the terminator line. So the way I see it, the terminator line is kind of going like that. That's where I see this sort of, when I squint down, and squinting is a really great way to get the terminator line, to sort of break your picture up into two colours. That's what I see. I sort of see a line going, it goes away when I put my hand over it, but sort of around here. So yeah, basically the concept here is instead of seeing all the different tones, we just want to break our picture down into two different tones. A light shade and a dark shade. So now I'm going to draw in the core shadow. And that's going to be this side over here. This is very rough shading, as you can see, and I'm not using any of those techniques that we looked at in the last lesson. Although I guess if anything, it's probably closest to hatching. Alright, so when we fill in the core shadow area, we don't want to make it too dark, because we're going to be adding darkness into it. And we don't want to make it too light either, but light is better than dark because we can always add more darkness in, but taking away darkness is a little bit harder. We ultimately need to just rub it out and start again if we wanted to take away darkness. Alright, great. There we go. And as you can see, there is no actual clear line on this ball. It is just a gradient from light to dark. But what the challenge, and what your challenge is going to be, is seeing that line in your head and creating that line. Now, where you see that line might be entirely different to where I see that line. I can also imagine some people might see the line just here. So you could kind of just have your white bit just being the circle here, and then everything else around here might be dark. So yeah, that's basically your decision as an artist where that line goes, and that's going to sort of really help you to create the feel of your artwork. If you want your art to sort of have more depth and be a bit darker, you might want to have more in your core shadow. Whereas if you want it to sort of be lighter and floatier, we might have a bit less area in our core shadow. We might just have this area around here. Alright, great. So that is one of the key principles that you will need to understand anytime you are drawing something with pencil. The first step is always to find your core shadow. Now, what you want to do after that is, we're not always going to be drawing spheres, so it's going to be similar with other shapes as well. So I'll show you now some pictures that I've drawn where I've started with a core shadow area. So I've just chosen what the dark area and what the light area is, and I'll show you how I have developed that and sort of blended that out into a more refined picture. And this only took me about an hour and a half, so it's obviously not extraordinarily refined yet. Alright, so what we want to understand now is what some of the different types of light are in our picture. So as I was saying before, we've got reflected light, and that's sort of what we can see here. Like you can see for some reason we've got a slightly lighter area going on here, and it's not really completely obvious why, but it's probably because there's some light, because the light is obviously on this side, coming from this side, but there's some light bouncing off the wall over here and hitting back on the ball. I imagine is probably the reason that we've got some reflected light over here. And we've also got a little bit of reflected light coming up here. We can see there's a little light bit over here that we can see. We've also got our cast shadow, so that's this area here. You can't see it very well because the camera is chopping it off. Let's see if we can, there we go. There's our cast shadow. We've also got some of our mid-tones going on around here. And yeah, as I said, our highlight over here as well. So now, after we've created our core shadow area, we're going to want to be more realistic and create some of those other shadow areas too. So, first of all, you want to identify where those areas are. So I'm identifying sort of our darkest area being around here. I'm just going to draw in the shape, I'm not going to totally shade it yet. We've got some reflected light here and some reflected light here. I can't draw in negative here, but to create that reflected light down here, I'm going to probably need to use my eraser a little bit. If you have one, a putty eraser is really good for that sort of thing. And then our mid-tones are going to come in around here, so as I said, we've got another sort of layer, or another place we could have drawn our core shadow, which is here. I'm going to sort of make all of this my mid-tone area, and then here is my highlight area, and then there's a sort of super highlight in there. So now what I'm going to do is choose what shade I'm going to use for each of those colours. I also forgot to mention we need our cast shadow as well, so that's going to be somewhere around here. Right, so looking at this, the darkest place on the sphere is definitely here. So I'm going to draw in my darkest shade here. I'm going to make that fairly dark, because I'm going to exaggerate this sphere. I don't want this to sort of be a light floaty sphere, I want it to be a heavy sphere. Then after that, we've probably got some of our mid-tone, or sort of more core area that's coming out around here. So I'm gonna, and I might even put numbers next to them for where I'm going to, that can also be a really helpful way of identifying what colours you're going to put where. So I'm going to put a 1 next to this, and then put that little 1 there. And there's sort of maybe like a 2 going around here. And then in my proper mid-tone area, it's probably going to be a similar colour to what I've already got it there. And then we're moving into more of the lighter area. And then the second lightest highlight. And then finally the highlight, which I'm just going to leave blank because I'm not going to draw any colour in there. So I'm going to put numbers next to all of these. And I'm just going to write in where these colours are going to be, these numbers are going to be. So I'm actually probably going to make this reflected area here a 3 because it's getting a little bit lighter than that area around it, whereas this is a 2. It's probably going to be like a 4 over here in this little bit of reflected light. This area here will be a 4. This area will be a 5, and then in there we have a 6. And then for our cast shadow, what number do you think our cast shadow is going to be? I'm thinking a 3. Alright. So now what I'm going to do is I'm still going to keep it very sort of, all the colours are going to be disjointed. They're not going to be blended together yet, but I'm going to start to fill those colours in. So I invite you to join me as I do this. So as I said, we don't need to blend the colours yet. We're just creating them there and putting them there because we might change them later on, and that's a lot harder to do once we've blended it. So we need to put our 2 in. Was a little bit loud. That's our... forgot to write that. That's our 3. We'll move into our 4. I might just add a little bit more into this 3 here to make the difference between the 3 and the 4 a bit more obvious. Alright, now our 5, which is going to be very light. And we're going to go back over here to our 3 for our cast shadow. So remembering our 3 is the same colour as what we have over here in this area, and this area. Alright, so if you would like, either if you're doing this in a group or by yourself, you might like to call out to your friends or just to the abyss of nothingness. What is the name of the shadow we've got here? I'm feeling like Dora the Explorer right now. That's correct, it is the cast shadow. What's this area called here? That's our reflected shadow. Then this area here are some different tones within the... Yes, that's right, core shadow. Then in this area here, We have the highlight, which is getting lighter and lighter as we go on. And I just realized I've also forgotten to do a little bit of reflected light over here, which I'm going to use my putty eraser to do. Rubbed out way too much there. Alright, cool. Now we've got all of our different tones, and all we've got to do now in the final step is blend them together. And this is where we might want to bring in more of our serious shading techniques that we learnt last lesson. We might want to think about how we're going to use contouring. We also are going to want to rub out lines like these ones, which are clearly very distracting. I'll just shade back in over the top. We're going to sort of join those colours together now so that they become one. So I might just speed myself up doing this. And if you're not quite sure how to blend these colours in, one thing you might like to practice doing is just practicing making a gradient, because that's basically what we're doing at the moment. We're just making a gradient between the colours. So the way you make a gradient is you start off drawing really hard on one side, and you gradually get softer and softer and softer. So that's sort of the process that we're trying to do as we blend each of our different values into each other. I'm going to start doing a little bit of contouring now as well, just to get that very three-dimensional spherical shape, so not all of my lines are going in one direction anymore. And I'm just going to check my sphere and look at it and think, does it actually look like that sphere or not? I'm thinking I should probably increase the size. And like I said, it's difficult to rub out of areas, so try and avoid that. But I'm wanting to increase the size of that reflected light there. Excellent. Okay, this could do with much more refining, but I might leave it there because I think that really gives you the idea of what we're looking for at the moment. I'll rub out that little circle. And that's sort of how you go from quite sort of disjointed shape with lots of different shapes, sort of like pop art, lots of different tones I mean, which are not blended like pop art, through to a much more blended, holistic, three-dimensional shape. Now, if you're interested in your art looking a little bit more dramatic, perhaps, then what you might want to do is not blend in those lines so much and keep those lines a little bit more separate and emphasized, and that will give your work a bit more of an interesting look. Cool, so now that you've done that, what you might want to do is start to bring in some of the texture as well. I won't go through and do all the little bits of texture, but that's an option for you if you want to bring in little bits of the texture on the sphere here. And of course you can easily pick up these polystyrene spheres from any sort of $2 shop. If you are buying one, I recommend you buy it to keep and you don't throw it away, because of course polystyrene is not very good for the environment. But yeah, that is how you create depth in a sphere. What I'd love all my darling listeners to do now is to find an object that you can really see those shadows on, and try to use this process on a different object. So, for example, you might like to use a watering can, like the one I've got lying around my house, or a pitcher, or even a vase. The main thing is you want something that doesn't have many patterns on it, something that's quite plain, so that we can just focus in on the shadows and what the shadows are doing. And yeah, the more interesting your object, the more interesting the shadows will be, and the more fun you'll probably have doing it as well. So I really hope that you have enjoyed today's video on how to create depth in your object through shadows, and I will see you all next time. Bye.